Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone. Okay, so bismillah, we will start this workshop. It's great to see a lot of people come out. So as you guys saw, the title is I text back too fast. So it's up to you guys to see how you interpret it, but we will have a nice discussion inshallah, and we'll see what you guys have in mind regarding this topic. With me, so before I begin, my name is Maria, for those of you who don't know me. I'm a recent graduate from UAdwa, currently trying to be a responsible adult. I have a full-time job. It's very different, but alhamdulillah, it's nice. We also have Sh.Daood with us and Sh.Saad Tasleem, so please give them a round welcome. Aussi, s'il y a des questions en français, Sh.Daood parle en français, donc ça va être facile pour lui pour les répondre. Donc, on va commencer maintenant. So, also another thing, please, we are limited on time. So for us to use time wisely, please ask your questions right now. There are volunteers in the room, Khadija and Huda. They have Post-its with them. If in case you want to ask a question like that, you're more than welcome to write it on the Post-it note and they'll bring it up to us. And once the workshop's over, we won't be taking any questions. So please respect that, and inshallah, I'm sure we will have a great discussion. Thank you.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه من والاه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Okay, I'm just going to give like a brief introduction on this topic. So, some time ago, actually it was about 5 or 6 years ago, I started teaching a seminar for Al-Maghrib called the Fiqh of Chillin'. And basically in this seminar there was a whole section where we talked about social media. And this section started off with an introduction to social media and the impact that social media is having upon society and us as individuals as well. And some of the data that I collected, like it's kind of old now, it's like data from like the early 2000s and all that. But what people were finding back then was that addiction to social media is a very real thing. So someone who they have like these tests and stuff like that you fill out these forms, and depending on how many hours you spend online and so on and so forth, you could kind of tell whether somebody is addicted to social media or not. And also the whole aspect of, okay, if you take away social media from them, if they like kind of go cold turkey, like they quit, then someone who's addicted to social media will go through like the same withdrawal symptoms that somebody who's like addicted to drugs and stuff like that. So basically like they start to freak out, they crave it, they need it, and like it seriously affects their life. And one of the characteristics of addiction is when it impedes the quality of our life and it affects our relationships. And what they found is that people who were addicted to social media, that is one of the keys of that addiction, was that it was taking over people's lives, and it was affecting their relationships, it was affecting their jobs, it was affecting their motivation, and so on and so forth. So social media, or addiction to social media, is a very real thing. Now fast forward like half a decade or a decade, what we're finding now is that the discussion of addiction to social media is not really a discussion that people are having anymore, because it's become so mainstream, it's become so common, it's become such a big part of our lives now that when we say even the phrase or the expression addiction to social media, we kind of ourselves become insecure about it, right? Because there's hardly an individual who isn't on social media. There's hardly an individual that doesn't have a smartphone, right? Like an iPhone or some other lame phone, right? So, so it's all of us, right? So then how can we now take stand on our pedestal and be like, yeah, addiction to social media and all of you are crazy and you need to deal with this. And, back when social media, I remember when Facebook started, we heard a lot of people talk about how Facebook is haram, right? Like just stay off of Facebook. There's so much bad happening on Facebook and like the internet, and like the internet is haram. Right? And you say that now, and actually people will laugh. They will literally laugh at you and be like, what do you mean Facebook's haram? Like, that's ridiculous, right? Or the internet is haram, right? So the discussion has shifted, and I think this is the reality of where we are right now. It's whether it's good or not, that's irrelevant at this point. Because the reality is, as I said, we're all online. We're constantly online. And even, back when they started doing these studies on social media, they would do these surveys where they would ask people, like, how much time do you spend online? And those surveys are really hard to do now because we don't really like try to see like how much time. It's not like we don't have set hours. We don't have set times of the day where we're online. We have our phones. So in a way, we're constantly online, right? We get a notification. We're waiting for something. We just open up Instagram or Twitter or Snapchat or whatever it may be. That's our life. So an argument can be made that we are online 24/7. And sometimes, subhanAllah, we even dream like online, right? And what does that mean? That means, well, you posted something before going to bed, and while you're sleeping, you're like thinking about it. Maybe like it shows up in your dreams as well. Like, I wonder how many people liked my status, right? I wonder what kind of comments I got. I wonder what happened, and you wake up in the morning, and the first thing, before Fajr or whatever, you're like, okay, let me just check real quick. Like, how many people liked it? What happened, right? So an argument can be made that we're online 24/7. So the discussion that I would like to have, inshallah ta'ala, today is let's talk about how to be responsible with social media, right? And where are our boundaries? And I believe that we do have to have boundaries, right? Things are not black and white always, and that's like, I totally believe that. But at the same time, we do need certain boundaries, and we do need guidelines, and we do need to kind of steer ourselves in the direction of being productive online in our dunya and our akhirah as well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Ma ba'd. I'm going to do an experiment. Are you guys okay with that? You have to follow the rules. You don't have to do anything that's wrong or bad. You just need to close your eyes right now. Everyone. Every single person in the room. And I could see if your eyes are open, so close your eyes. Close your eyes. Good. Now, everyone's eyes are closed, okay? From what I could see, except you, close your eyes. Keep your eyes closed. Stop looking. You too, close your eyes, okay? Raise your hand if you bring your phone into the washroom. Okay, put your hand down. All right, you can open your eyes. Do you think you're addicted to your phones? Right? I would say about, what, 80% of the people raised their hands?
My eyes were closed.
Oh, your eyes were closed too? Oh man, mashallah, look at that, alhamdulillah. About 80% of you raised your hands, which means another 80% of the 20% was too shy to raise their hands, right? So 88% of you technically bring your phones into the bathroom. And that's interesting, subhanAllah, because once upon a time you would go into like, your parents' or your grandparents' bathroom, you find like magazines or, the newspaper with the classifieds or whatever is there, something to pass time. But subhanAllah, people like nowadays, we've taken it to the next level. Like Sh.Saad was saying, we are online 24/7, including not only in our dreams, but in the bathroom. And subhanAllah, what's really interesting about that is that, and he concluded with what I was hoping we would focus on today as well, is boundaries, because everyone goes through hardships. You're not the only one. Like I was just snapping that I'm sitting next to him. I haven't seen Sh.Saad like since we graduated from Medina. I've only ran into you once in Toronto, right? So only once, subhanAllah. And I remember the days when he used to sleep in my room. On the floor. I used to sleep on the floor too, so yeah, but subhanAllah, those were the days. It was a long time ago, and I remember at that time, I didn't even have a Facebook account. When I was a student in Medina, the first time I opened a Facebook account, my brother did it for me in 2011. 2011, my brother opened my first social media account, and that was Facebook, and I only opened that account so that he wrote my bio, right? The public profile. And literally, one of my Quran students was the first person to click like, right? So it's transitioned so much, and I being someone who was totally against it. Like I was a student in Medina, no way I'm having Facebook, right? But everyone was like, well, you're in touch with family, friends back home, you get to see what they're doing. But now, subhanAllah, I just snapped, right? I never thought I'd be using Snapchat. So I ask you this question, just to show you where things are going with regards to social media and its usage, etc. I asked this question to a high school that I was teaching at last year, an Islamic high school in the Toronto area. And I'm going to ask you these questions as well. Raise your hand if you use or have a Facebook account. Okay, put your hand down. Raise your hand if you have or use a Twitter account. Okay, raise your hand if you have or use Instagram and Snapchat. Almost everyone puts their hand up at Snapchat, right? That's really interesting, subhanAllah. When I did this at high school, now there's some people in here that are like my age, right? So it's understandable that more people raise their hands with regards to the question about Facebook. But the younger generation is not really hooked on Facebook anymore. It's more Snapchat. And you'll notice the reasons behind that. Facebook, a lot more reading. You could write a post that's like this long, and tomorrow it continues, right? Twitter, a lot less reading, so more people tend to use it, right? But it's also a lot different in, its nature. Then you move to Instagram. Almost everyone uses Instagram because it's a quick thing, it's a picture, you look at it, and now Instagram incorporated Snapchat's, features where you have videos live and so on and so forth. So that's there as well within Instagram. But before that all came out, lots of people were on Instagram, but the younger generation, if you say Snapchat, they're saying DJ Khalid back at you, right? They're just like, yeah, DJ Khalid. That's exactly what happened to me. And my wife was the one who asked me or told me to open up a Snapchat account. She's like, if the youth are on it, you need to be on it too. Exactly, you don't need to know. Don't worry. Khalid is throwing you off. Just think DJ, haram, astaghfirullah, right? So subhanAllah. What's really interesting there is our youth are doing a lot of things, and I don't really like to call you youth, because what I see in front of me is young adults. Youth are like little children, and I see young adults in front of me. And so it's important for us to understand our limits. It's important for us to know how to use social media and the dangers of it as well. Some people are just super naive as to how these, platforms work. And so it's important for us to educate ourselves, and we'll dive into that. I'm hoping it's more questions, inshaAllah ta'ala, and discussion back and forth. Barakallahu feek.
Thank you. Okay, so to start, is there any question with first brave person? Start. Yes, right on the front.
Is there a possibility as to how we can minimize the use of social media?
Sure there is.
You want to just... That's too low for me. I'm like slouching just easy. So the question here is there a way or some sort of possibility where a person can limit their usage of social media? Some of you may have met Sheikh Naveed Aziz, who's doing his lecture right now. He was just in this workshop room before. One thing that was really interesting, he gave in, like he caved, but last year and I think the year before, he had no data on his phone. So he always had the latest phone, but no data connection, he couldn't connect to the internet unless he was in a Wi-Fi zone. And that was so annoying because as someone who messages him regularly, it's like sometimes you have to wait 7 or 8 hours before he responds to you. But
Or he tells you to turn on your hotspot, right?
Yeah, then he uses all your data by watching videos. But yeah, that's really interesting. So that's one thing that he does. One thing that I like to do when I'm going to bed at night is I just turn off my connection from my phone. I don't want to be connected. I want to sleep. I'm in charge of my sleep, and it's very difficult for a lot of people to do that. You'll hear that ding, ding, ding every 5 seconds. Sometimes I'm telling my wife, like, turn your ringer off, right? Because someone is just messaging constantly at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. So limit it as best as you can, but I'm sure there's many other ways.
Bismillah. So this is something I've actually thought about quite a bit. The issue of like, how do we limit ourselves and like, where do we limit ourselves? And there's no like right answer to this, but a couple of things that I would actually recommend is, and I know this sounds cliche, number one, and number two, when you see people doing this, I know a lot of other people like roll their eyes, and that is fasting from social media. Usually when Ramadan starts, usually there's a couple people who are like, yeah, I'm turning off my social media or whatever. And then in the comments, people are like, why are you showing off, right? Just do it. Like, why do you got to post on social media about fasting from social media? Why are you such a hypocrite? And so on and so forth. And I'm like, alhamdulillah, at least this person is like taking a step. Maybe they want some support, right? Maybe they want people to be like, look, right on, like more power to you, and we'll help you, and so on and so forth. So for me, like I think that's something that we should encourage. The month of Ramadan is the month of restraint. It's a month of cutting back. So I actually really like that idea. And for me personally, I kind of shot myself in the foot 3 or 4 Ramadans ago because I decided to do Snapchat reminders in Ramadan. So instead of like being less active in Ramadan, I ended up being more active in Ramadan. But other than that, like other than my Snapchat and a couple other things, I personally try to like use the month of Ramadan to kind of disconnect. And I feel like we really need to make a conscious effort to have those times in our lives where we disconnect. And it's not like, yeah, I need to cut down or like I need to find some time. I mean, set realistic goals for yourself that you can actually follow through with. So if you tell yourself like, yeah, I'm going to restrict my online usage to like an hour a day, I would say maybe that's not a realistic goal, depending on who you are, right? But if you tell yourself like, listen, an hour before going to bed, like Sh.Daood was saying, like I'm just going to turn off my phone or I'm going to turn on silent, I'm going to put it in the other room. And one of the things I would actually recommend is for you to buy an alarm clock, like an old school, real deal alarm clock. Because a lot of times we rely upon our phones for, how many people have used their phones as their alarms? Okay, right? Most everyone. So that means our phone has to be right next to us. And that means there's always that urge to like pick up the phone, to check, and maybe if we're having trouble sleeping, we pick up our phone and start scrolling through Instagram or whatever it may be. But yeah, separate yourself from your phone. One of the things that was really helpful for me personally was I told myself, and I made this deal with my wife, I said, when we're spending time with my son's 2 and a bit, and I travel quite a bit, so like my time with my son is very, very valuable to me. And so we made this deal. We said, look, when we're spending time with our son, like our phones are literally, like actually literally, not the British literally, like literally, they're on the other side of the room or they're in a different room. And we actually bought a landline, a house phone, which, you know, where I live, most people don't have like house phones anymore, right? Because like, everyone has cell phones. No one bothers to buy a house phone. We bought a house phone just for that purpose, just for, look, when we put our cell phones away and we're like an hour into like not touching our cell phones, if there's an emergency, there's like another phone where somebody can reach us. We never pick up that phone. We've told all our relatives and anybody, like, if it's really an emergency, don't call once, call like 20 times. Because like when our landline rings once or twice, we don't pick it up, right? So those are just some ideas, but I think, I mean, mashallah, I'm sure all of you are very creative people. It's just kind of like being conscious about it and making a conscious decision to kind of separate yourself, spend time away from your phone. Allah.
channel, it will never end. Instagram, Snapchat, and those, I am one of the person, I don't have that on myself. Not before, because I don't want, I don't want, because it follows me everywhere. It follows, it's wasting my time. And I'm an age 30, and I need to focus on my life, because the real life is practically not literally watching. You'll never do anything, you'll never get anything done with just watching and picturing each other.
Jazakallah.
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 Do you want to say something on that? Be looked into?
A little bit. Yeah, we got them.
Yeah, there's loads of things.
There's tons of things to say about that. Maybe you just want to like speak generally about it.
Yeah. There is a question before we come to your question. There is a question that came up here. It's a written question. What is the link between social media and mental health? And personally, as someone who does quite a bit of counseling in my community back in the GTA, I've noticed that a lot of people tend to live in a bubble. I was telling this to my mother-in-law yesterday in the car, right? She's 76 years old, never had a cell phone, doesn't even know how to use a cell phone if there was an emergency, right? But I was saying how a lot of people live in this bubble where they will see certain people on social media and think that that's the ideal lifestyle. So then they become sad and depressed with regards to their life and what they have and what they're going through. They fail to actually see what's happening around them and what they are blessed with from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and always trying to chase after something that someone else has without realizing Allah has already given you something to enjoy yourself. So I'm just going to say that basically about the link between social media and mental health. There is a link. There are many therapists and doctors that you can go to and see that will help you with this. They've studied it, they look into it, they spend their days around that. But there definitely is a link between it, and ultimate happiness is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So don't chase after someone else's dream, live your own dream.
Jazakallah khair. I'll just highlight one of the aspects which I believe he touched upon as well, and that's the issue of self-esteem and self-worth. And we find this generation having a serious problem with self-esteem, self-worth, even body image issues. And if you really look into like problems of body image and self-esteem, they go back to two broad issues and two broad topics. Number one is comparison, and number two is fantasy. Right? So when we start comparing ourselves to others and we look at their lives and what they have, and then we look at ourselves and we're like, yeah, I'm not good enough, and so on and so forth. And then fantasy, right? We have this fantasy about what we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to be and all that. So those are two of the aspects that really, really affect our self-esteem, and they affect our self-worth, and they have psychological implications that we may not realize, right? And I think one of the biggest poisons for our self-esteem and self-worth is, and I hate to say this and sound really negative and like sound like an uncle and stuff like that, but is our Instagram feed, right? Because what are we doing on our Instagram feed? We're looking at other people's lives, and we're looking at a perfect version of their life, a highly edited version of their lives. I mean, if you look at Insta celebrities, right? So those people who are like, y'all know what Insta celebrities are? And somebody who's like a nobody in real life, but on Instagram they're like super popular, right? An Insta celebrity, they'll post like a photo, 2-3 photos a day or whatever, and their whole life is based off of posting stuff that looks a certain way. So a lot of these Insta celebrities, when they're interviewed, they'll say like, yeah, we'll go to like we'll take some pictures, but we'll take like 80 or 90 pictures, and then we'll pick one of them and filter that and edit it and so on and so forth. And that's a very challenging way to live your life. But beyond them, everyone who's looking at that, or some people who are looking at that, they look at that and think that's the norm. Right? And even, I don't know how many of you are into like fitness and health and all that kind of stuff. The fitness accounts on Instagram are crazy. Right? It's like this completely fantasy, unrealistic idea of what a man's body and a woman's body is supposed to look like. right? And we're told, yeah, this is achievable, this is realistic, you can do this, and so on and so forth. You know, a lot of these, I can tell you from the guy's side, right? At least from the guy's side, a lot of these Instagram models, they're taking steroids, they're putting their health in jeopardy. They live a lifestyle which is not a lifestyle that the average person, most people can live, right? But we're told, like, yeah, you know, just believe in yourself and work hard and, you know, you could achieve this body, which is completely false, right? It's khiyana, it's deception of people, or that's what it is. But unfortunately, like, we see that, and even, I know, like, some people are like, yeah, I don't believe it. But when we're looking at that constantly, right, we, like, at least on a subconscious level, we're going to believe that that's the norm. And then some part of us is going to be affected by that. That's just one of the aspects. As Sh.Daood said, this is actually something that needs to be talked about at length. You know, the repercussions of social media, mental health, relationships, like so much is being affected by. And the other thing about social media is we're in the world of social media right now, or in, like, if you look at the history of social media, we're at its birth, right? So we don't even really know the true long-term implications and effects of social media, right? Like, we're just starting to see some of the effects of it. I mean, give it another few decades, you know, when this generation grows up. I mean, let's be honest here, we're living with a generation that was born into social media, and this hasn't happened before, right? Where a child is born, I mean, you think about this, I think about this all the time, being a parent, you know, when a child is born, the parents, from, like, the moment of delivery, right, the child is online, which is, like, it blows my mind. And I often, subhanAllah, like, not to judge anyone, but I personally, like, I cringe sometimes when I see, like, photos from the delivery room, right? I'm like, man, this is supposed to be, like, a really intimate moment between you and your family, and it's like, you know, and this child comes out, and ain't nobody trying to see that child anyway, right? This, like, nasty child with, like, you know, all this, I mean, come on, nobody wants to see that. And everyone in the comments is going to be like, yo, mashallah, so beautiful. Everyone's thinking, like, whoa, is that what children look like when they come out, right? Nobody's really interested in seeing that. But from the moment, and imagine, subhanAllah, and I often think about this, how would I feel if my whole life was online? Like, how would I feel if there were pictures from the delivery room of when I was born? And I'm like, alhamdulillah, there was no social media back then, right? And what about all the other things that happened? Like, I did some dumb stuff in my life, right? Imagine I documented all that stuff, right? And that's a very real scenario now, right? Because our whole lives are online. How does that affect our future, right? When we're trying to get a job, or, you know, we make changes in our lives, or we turn a new leaf, or whatever, and our past is just documented online. So these are all things that, you know, we need to consider. And I speak to parents, I speak to children, I speak to everyone. Like, we really need to look beyond today, right? Or next week, or next month, of, like, oh, how many followers can I get? How many comments can I get? How many likes can I get? How, you know, it'll make me feel good in the moment, or whatever. But, like, 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, or even, subhanAllah, after we die, right? What is that gonna, like, what is our social media gonna look like? And whether we like it or not, we're leaving our social media lives behind. And I know it sucks to think about this, but when we die, people are gonna log on to our social media and be like, let's see what they were like. And people will literally be able to go back to birth, right? Which is insane. So I really feel like, you know, the issue, and especially, like, taking control of our social media, I feel like sometimes we just go with the flow, right? Like, everyone else is doing it, so we do it. It's become socially acceptable, so let's all just keep doing it. And we don't think about the implications. But really just becoming conscious of what we're posting and how it affects us, how it affects the people in our lives, how it affects ourselves, and being conscious about what we post online. Wallah.
So we have a couple questions here. For example, is it wrong to have the opposite gender on your social media if you're not talking to them? For example, classmates or coworkers? And another similar question is, how can you keep boundaries on social media regarding gender interaction?
Bismillah. So, is it wrong to have other people on social media who you're not really mahram to, basically? Is that the question? Personally, I discourage it. So, I don't know. I never really understood why people have someone of the opposite gender that they're not even related to, that they don't even know, that probably doesn't even live in the same country that they live in, as friends on Facebook, for example. It just, to me, doesn't really make sense, right? And I encourage a lot of people to stop doing that. If you do have that, if you're that person, then start filtering them out. Because what happens is, and has been a very big problem, especially for some of the sisters when they're looking to get married, right? Guys, mashallah, they go on Facebook, they're like, oh, that's her name, khalas, type it in there. And they get pictures, and like Sh.Saad was saying, going back many years of us doing things that we probably didn't think we would put online, but we did. Or we put it online thinking, I don't really care if anyone thinks about that. But 10 years later, we forgot that we put that online. And then when people see it, they start judging us, etc. So there's a lot of harms and dangers in there. We can go diving super deep into this topic. What was the second part?
So how to keep boundaries.
How to keep boundaries? Yeah, basically just cut them off. Just be blunt. Like, I don't need to speak to you. Why do I need to speak to you? Right? Unless someone is asking, like, for example, we have social media platforms where people ask questions. So we answer the questions, right? But you need to be someone who's in control. If you're going to be using that as, okay, sister XYZ messaged me, oh, mashallah, look at that profile picture, right? And then you go click it and you go check out their profile and so on. There's actually settings that can stop you from doing that or stop others from doing that to you. So check your settings regularly. Personally, that's what I tell anyone. You want to be my friend on Facebook, go to the public profile, click like, and you can send me a message if you need to ask me a question, and I can't see your profile. I just leave it at that. I don't want to see your profile. I don't have the need to see it. So it's important for us to set those boundaries for ourselves as well. I get loads of people that send me, friend requests. Don't need it. It's a waste of my time. And one thing with regards to social media, I've been thinking about this from the very beginning, is if you value yourself, you will be in control of your phone and your social media platforms. If you don't value yourself, then you're going to let it take control of you. All right? So ask yourself that question. Who's in control, you or your phone? When your phone beeps or vibrates, is that dopamine taking over in you? Or are you taking over and saying, no, it's okay, I don't need to listen to that, or I don't need to check it right now? And we see it happening when people are driving as well, subhanAllah, right? Driving and texting and messaging, and sometimes things that are totally irrelevant. So set limits. I don't know, that's me personally. That's what I encourage people to do. Be blunt. Allahu A'lam. Sheikh Naveed, do you need a hotspot?
No hotspot? That's already done. We took care of that already.
Yeah,
already happened. Already happened. Yeah. Okay, bismillah. So,
for the record, though, the two of them slept in my room. Right? Don't ask me how that happened, because our room was like 6 feet by 7 feet.
That's actually true, but not why you think so. But anyhow, bismillah. So these two questions, they seem to be, or we could say that they're related. First is, what age do you think a person should have a phone? Second is, as a parent, do you think we should watch every activity of our kids online? Most social media have an 18-year-old rule for younger kids. Okay, so in general, and I'm just going to preface my answer by saying this may be a little bit controversial, and I apologize for that. But I don't think there is a set age, right? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't set an age. I just don't think there's one particular age where you say, look, as long as you give your child a phone after 14, everything will be fine, right? That's not how it works. There's children who get a phone when they're 10 and they're fine, right? And then there's children who get a phone when they're 17 or 18 and they still go in the completely wrong direction. And the main factor here is really tarbiyah and upbringing, right? Like what we have talked to our kids about, what discussions we've had with our kids. And I think, on a personal level, I think about this a lot because my kid's still 2.5, and I often think about this issue of like, what am I doing to prepare him for the world that he's stepping into, right? I can take the easy route, which I firmly believe is the easy route, to just shield and shelter him from everything, right? And just be like, no, I'm not going to give him a phone. He's never going to watch TV. He's never going to log online. None of that stuff, right? Just keep him, maybe just lock him in the basement, right? Chain him up or whatever. right? Just keep him totally away until he's 21, get him married and khalas, right? Like, that's the easy way out, right? But you know that's ridiculous because that doesn't work, right? So I believe in educating kids. I believe in talking to kids about the issues and problems that are out there, right? Like, let's take something kind of controversial, right? Game of Thrones, right? Many people watch Game of Thrones, and more people watch it than they would care to admit, right? So there's one school of thought that says, you know, banish your kids from, like, keep TV away from the kids and so on and so forth or whatever. There's another school of thought, which I follow, which says, hey, listen, how about you sit down with your kid and talk to them about Game of Thrones and be like, look, there's a TV show out there that is very popular and people watch it and so on and so forth. However, here's the problems with it and here's the issues with it. And, you know, like the language and the nudity and the, you know, sexuality and like all this stuff and the violence and so on and so forth. Educate your kids, right? Tell them, talk to them about the dangers and the problems and how, you know, viewing those type of, you know, TV shows or whatever can lead to something like a pornography addiction, which can lead to like serious problems in a person's life and their marriage and so on and so forth, psychological issues and mental health issues and all of that. Like I think we need to have these real discussions with our kids. And sometimes, like I said, it's like the easier route is just to shelter them, to be like, no, I'm just not going to ever give them a phone. I'm not going to ever, you know, I'm just going to keep them away. I'm never going to let them go to college or university or whatever. And that's not an answer. Right? Because if you just lock somebody up for a long time, as soon as they get their freedom, they're going to go wild. And like we've seen it happen, right? Like especially those of you who are probably around my age who've been through college, university, you know, we all saw people who grew up super conservative, super sheltered and all that. And as soon as they got their freedom, they didn't just go like they went super crazy, right? Because all of a sudden, there's like all this stuff that they were never exposed, they knew nothing about, and like this door opened up for them, right? So that's a problem. For me, like I said, not to say that it should be a free-for-all. That's not my message here. My message here is that, yeah, that we should have boundaries and restrictions for our kids, but they should be accompanied with dialogue and discussion and understanding. And even, subhanAllah, I was speaking to a brother who has a son who's 12 years old. And I asked him, I said, just out of curiosity, because, you know, I have a son as well, I'm like, have you talked to him about sex? Right? And he goes, yeah, I had that discussion. I was like, what was it like? And he goes, it was super uncomfortable and it was super awkward. And I didn't know, like, and you know, I was really reluctant to do it, but I'm glad I did, because once I got my child to open up, I realized that he was already exposed to things that I never would have imagined. And he had so many questions. And there's so many issues that he, at 12 years old, he was already dealing with. And then his brother told him, he said, my only regret is that I waited until he was 12 to have that conversation with him, right? And a lot of times that is sometimes very late, right? So at a young age, and I know, like, especially, you know, culturally and from back home and whatever, I know my parents never had that discussion. Like, we never had that discussion in my household, right? That's just, like, that would be something which is ridiculous to even, and so, but this is, like, this generation, like, we owe it to them, right? Like, if we've been through these issues, like, we can't just pass them down, right? You can't just take the easy way out and say, you know what, they'll figure it out, or I'll just set rules for them and just, you know, just hopefully that'll work. That's not always enough. Allah.
There's actually a small follow-up question
Yeah.
regarding that. It says, but my kids are not mature enough to value their parents' advice. How can that change, and how can I get my kids to truly understand what or why am I saying?
You can't make your kids understand anything. You can't make your kids listen to you. The best you can do is to be open with them, is to have a dialogue with them, is to have a discussion with them, is to have a good relationship with them where they feel comfortable talking to you, and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah protects them. I mean, that's pretty much all that you can do, because the guidance of our kids, the guidance of anyone, really, for that matter, is not in our hands. Right? Even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was told, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. That you don't guide those whom you love, rather it is Allah who guides whomever He loves. And that is why we have stories of prophets who had, alayhim salatu wasalam, who had problems with their own families. right? Nuh alayhi salam. And so there's so many examples that we have. And that lesson for us is, in the end of the day, like as a parent, we do the best we can do, but results are in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have to trust in Allah that, our kids will turn out okay. Yeah, we make the effort. And I asked, actually, subhanAllah, I had this discussion with my mom when I had my son. And I was like, Mom, like, I'm freaking out here. Like, there's so much craziness in the world. I speak to a lot of young people, and, like, I see the craziness that's out there. Like, I see, like, the stuff kids are doing now, whatever. And I'm like, Mom, like, I'm freaking out here. Like, I don't know what to do. And she said, at a certain point, yeah, you have to try your best, but, it's part of your faith that you have trust in Allah. And it's part of your faith that you ask Allah to protect your kids, right? We make dua for our kids and we ask Allah to protect. And my mom's like, that's something that I did for you and for your siblings. There were times where, in my family, we weren't always a religious family. We weren't practicing for a long period of time. But my mom told me, like, even in those times, she said, I would always pray for you. I'd always pray that you'd be guided towards what is correct and what is best, right? So, wallah. No.
So the next question is,
No, you didn't just give me this. Question. Can you speak about how social media is jeopardizing relationships and marriages? And you asked me this question, my wife is in the room. Come on, man. Definitely is harming marriages. Like, I asked the question before, how many of you, we did it for those that came late, right? Disclaimer, we asked everyone to close their eyes and we asked a general question. How many of you take your phones into the bathroom? Don't raise your hands, right? So about 80% of the people, but subhanAllah, we can ask this question as well. How many of you lay down in bed at night and you're laying next to your spouse, but you're on your phone and he's on his phone or she's on her phone, whoever you are, right? So it is definitely affecting relationships. People are not spending as much time together anymore. Once upon a time, people would go out for dates with their spouse, no longer going out for dates, no longer going out for walks, not having those, family moments where you're sitting in the park together. So yeah, social media is definitely affecting people's lives in that way, their marriages, their relationship with their children. Children are seeing it as well, so that's one of the reasons why children pick up social media so quick. Parents who ask that question, well, how can I limit my children from using social media? Well, are you limiting your use of social media in front of your child? If not, well, your children are seeing you use it, right? So it is definitely a problem. So we acknowledge that it's there. Now, one thing we need to do is, like we mentioned earlier, is limit the use of social media. So for example, like I said, for myself, I set a limit, and I like to encourage my wife to set a limit sometimes too, right? Where the phone gets disconnected from the Wi-Fi. And to be honest, I love to sometimes just use a phone for a phone. Like, we don't use it as a phone anymore. No one calls anyone. People just message you. And if you don't respond after they see the 2 blue ticks there, they know you read that message. They just like, I know you saw the message. Why are you ignoring me? It's like, you know what? I might be busy. I might be driving. I might have something else more important than your life to live. And that's my life, right? But subhanAllah, people don't take it that way, and that's why I encourage people, disconnect yourself. Disconnect yourself. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be extremely, extremely difficult, but I found I needed to disconnect. And so I started with, like I said, step 1 was just turn it off at night, where I actually leave my ringer on full blast over the night. But because it's disconnected from the Wi-Fi, nobody calls me, no one messages me, and no one disturbs my sleep. And I leave it that way so that I always tell people, if there's really an emergency, people will pick up the phone and call you. Like, they're not going to say, you know what, someone just died, they had a car accident and Uncle so-and-so died in a car accident, and they're going to message you, 30, 40 times on WhatsApp. They're not going to do that. Or they're going to post it on Facebook. You'll be like, Daoud, check your messages, someone just died. They'll pick up the phone and call you, and if they're not going to call you, you are either not important enough or they are not important enough, right? So we need to understand that, inshallah.
do you guys have any other questions, or did you want? Oh, you did? up to you. Do you want to ask or?
The Facebook bio that he wrote for me? It's like pretty much the same bio that's in this thing right now. It's almost exactly the same. It's just been edited.
Did you have a question in the back? Yeah. I can't hear you. You have to speak louder, please. What do you mean personal opinions on that? I think basically they said that it's all about how you can limit yourself. It's beneficial, and at the same time, if you give too much time, it obviously would cause a lot of problems. So I think that would be the answer to that question. Is there any other question? We have about 5-6 minutes left. Yes. Sorry, you have to speak louder, please.
For example, what?
Shopping at Amazon.
Shopping on Amazon. Yeah, yeah. So I really like what Sh.Daood said. I think that's an amazing idea. I'm actually going to try and implement that. Use your phone as a phone, right? So turn off your data or your Wi-Fi and call and text, right? So you're still connected to people, like real people, not people like just online. And other than that, look, I'm just going to be real with you. Your life is not going to be that affected if you miss out on social media. And I say this not because it's the right thing to say. I've tried this, right? I've disconnected for days. And there's a part of you that says, man, I wonder what's going on out there. I wonder what's happening, like the latest news and this and that or whatever. And what you find actually is subhanAllah, which is crazy for me. And I'm actually going to speak about this in my session. And that is that the world keeps moving and things will constantly keep happening, whether you are fully informed, fully aware or not. Right? But what is important to you at the end of the day is your psychological and your spiritual health and your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So logging off for a day, 2 days or whatever, it's not going to affect your life. Right? Yeah, you're going to miss out on some gossip and some news and this and that and the latest of what's happening here and there. But if something is really, really important, you're going to hear about it. Right? People talk. Right? And there's real conversations to be had. Someone's going to come to you and say, hey, did you hear about this that happened there or whatever? You'll be like, no, tell me about it. Now, this is a real conversation that you're having rather than a post and then 250 comments where people are arguing back and forth and it just becomes another form of entertainment to watch people argue and get upset and this and that and all that. You're not missing out. Trust me. A lot.
And you're not shopping on Amazon when you're sleeping, buddy. Right? And if you are, just buy me something, send it to my house. I'm just joking. This sister had a question. Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I can answer this question in the few minutes that we have left. But because it is a nuanced answer. It's not black and white. Right? I'm not talking about the opinion of whether music's haram or not. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how to deal with these real life issues. It is a nuanced answer, so no. Yeah.
Chase him up on social media. He'll be Chase them up on social media.
By the way, I don't. My policy on social media is I do not do private messaging on any platform, right? Like any platform, right? I just don't want to open that door, and like, it's not because I think I'm like holier than thou or better than other speakers or whatever. I just know that it could potentially be a fitna, right? And I just don't want to open that door, and that's why I don't do private messaging. Nobody's sliding in anybody's DMs here, so.
I noticed that about Sh.Saad a while back. You posted about that, right? I think on Facebook or something. And I was like, well, that's actually pretty cool, because you wouldn't believe how much time I spend a day. And my wife was like, well, you're always on your phone. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm answering questions. And, hours sometimes you're just answering questions. No one's paying me for it, right? So I could go and spend 4 or 5 hours a day earning wealth somewhere else instead of answering questions, but it's just a door that once you open, subhanAllah, it just gets out of control. And I congratulate you for doing that, alhamdulillah.
So we'll take one last question.
What is the question is what is the comment on? One of the things I noticed is the harm of social media is that people have actually become anti-social. Like you take social media and then when you go into a room or you go like to the bus or and you sit next to someone, they're usually on their phone. And they're quote unquote socializing with people on their phone, and people have lost the art of speaking to each other. Like you could be in a room full of people and no one will say now or hey how are you or Saad or the art of just talking to the person next to you is also being lost, especially on social media as well.
So the key is to message them in the room. And no, I'm just kidding. You're absolutely right. There's a comedian who did this bit where he said, he's like, social media, more like anti-social media, haha, right? Which is like cliched, but it's right? And the irony of social media is that it's made us less social in the real sense of being social.
So I'm just thinking about being here at the conference today, that like I've been sitting next to some people here today at the conference, and as I'm sitting next to them and they're on their phone, and I know they don't take salam to you or they don't say anything, I'm just sitting here just being real.
So we walked into the speakers room before, and all the speakers and organizers, everyone was sitting around these 2 tables. All of them were on their phones. Not a single person was having a conversation with each other. It's a reality of our time. So I encourage you, subhanAllah, you know what's super cool? Like some people I admire, like Omar Reagan, right? You know Omar Reagan. This guy, mashallah, can pick up a conversation with anybody at any time, anywhere. Mashallah, like he's just got that skill. We don't have that anymore. We don't know how to interact with one another. We don't know how to strike up a conversation. And that's not the method of the Prophet ﷺ. You're with someone, you give them your full attention, right? Especially if you're talking to them, not like husband and wife messaging each other laying in bed. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this easy for us. One last thing I want to end with, because I know I'm probably going to get cut off, right? Think of when was the last time you washed your phone? So this brother actually told me, he's like, no, I have a Sony, and it's fully waterproof, or I think it was a Sony. He literally, or the new iPhone is as well, right? Yeah, so you can wash your phones. Those of you that can wash your phones, please do so. It's kind of gross that 80% of us bring our phones in the washroom and we don't wash our phones.
So on Amazon, where's the Amazon guy? He left? Wasn't feeling it. All right. You can get these wipes that are specifically made for your phones, which is a pretty good idea.
Okay, Jazakallah khairan, everyone. This will conclude our session, so thank you so much for joining us.